The crystalline walls of Kepler 7 mining station gleamed under the artificial suns, casting rainbow fragments across the opulent gathering hall. Neera moved silently between the assembled crime lords and merchants, her bare feet making no sound on the polished floor. The silver-blue skin that marked her as Vélanie caught the light as she refilled goblets with expensive Alterian wine, her violet eyes downcast in practiced submission. 15 years. 15 years since the raiders had torn her from her family's peaceful settlement, since she'd been thrust into the endless nightmare of servitude. Her once lustrous white hair, now dulled by exhaustion, was bound severely at the nape of her neck. The sheer fabric of her servant's garb left little to the imagination, another reminder that she was property, not a person. "More wine, slave," growled Master Vulcan from his position at the head table. The massive draconian scales rippled with annoyance as he gestured imperiously with one clawed hand. His yellow eyes glowed with malicious pleasure as they roved over her trembling form. "And be quick about it. My guests grow thirsty." Neera hurried forward, the metal collar around her throat humming with the energy that would deliver agonizing pain if she strayed too far or disobeyed. She'd learned long ago that survival meant invisibility, compliance, and the careful nurturing of the tiny flame of hope that still flickered in her heart. The gathering was one of Vulcan's regular displays of power. Crime bosses, slavers, and corrupt officials from across 3 sectors came to pay tribute and negotiate deals. The air thick with expensive perfumes and the musk of a dozen different species, all united in their cruelty and greed. "Tell me, Vulcan," hissed a serpentine scary merchant, her forked tongue tasting the air, "what news from the outer rim? The human colonies grow bold." Vulcan's laugh was like grinding stone. "Humans. Those pathetic creatures pose no threat. Weak, short-lived, and foolishly sentimental. I've broken dozens of them in my fighting pits." Neera's hand trembled slightly as she poured wine into the Scari's goblet. She'd heard whispers among the other slaves, tales of human rebels who struck at slaver convoys, who fought for the freedom of beings they'd never met. Most dismissed such stories as fantasy, but something in Neera's heart wanted desperately to believe. "Still," mused a hulking Goric warlord, his tusks gleaming as he spoke, "their raids have cost us profits. Perhaps we should." The lights went out. Emergency illumination bathed the hall in hellish red as alarms shrieked through the station. Vulcan roared in fury, his massive form rising from the table as his guards rushed to defensive positions. "What is the meaning of this?" An explosion rocked the station, sending several guests tumbling from their seats. Through the chaos, dark figures poured through the hall's entrances, humanoid forms in tactical gear, moving with deadly precision. Neera had never seen humans before, but somehow she knew. These were the rebels the slaves whispered about. "Nobody move." The voice that rang out was clear and commanding, enhanced by a helmet speakers. The lead figure stepped into the light, and Neera's breath caught. Even through the tactical visor, she could see kind eyes, brown and warm, so different from the cold cruelty she'd known for so long. "Jace Mitchell, Human Liberation Front," the figure announced, his weapon trained on Vulcan. "You're all under arrest for crimes against sentient beings." Vulcan's roar of rage shook the hall. "Insolent worms! Guards, kill them all!" The battle erupted in an instant. Energy bolts crisscrossed the hall as Vulcan's mercenaries engaged the human rebels. Neera dove behind an overturned table, her heart hammering as the fight raged around her. She'd seen violence before, had been its victim countless times, but never had she dared hope for rescue. A heavy hand grabbed her shoulder, and she cried out in terror, expecting Vulcan's claws. Instead, she found herself looking up into that same kind face, the helmet now retracted to reveal features weathered by hardship but softened by compassion. "Hey, it's okay," the human, Jace, said gently, his voice barely audible over the chaos. "I'm here to help. Can you walk?" Neera stared at him in shock. No one had asked about her welfare in 15 years. No one had looked at her with anything but lust or disdain. This human stranger's eyes held something she'd almost forgotten existed, genuine concern for another being's suffering. Yes, she managed, her voice barely a whisper. Jace's smile transformed his face. Good. We're getting you out of here. He raised his weapon as one of Vulcan's guards rounded the table, dropping the alien with a precise shot. All of you, he added, gesturing to the other cowering slaves. Freedom's waiting. The collar around Neera's throat chose that moment to activate, sending waves of agony through her nervous system. She collapsed, convulsing as the punishment protocol engaged. Through her pain, she heard Jace curse and saw him produce a small device from his belt. Hold still, he said, his voice tight with anger, not at her, she realized with wonder, but at her suffering. The device hummed as it interfaced with her collar, and suddenly the pain stopped. The hated band of metal fell away, clattering to the floor. For the first time in 15 years, Neera was free. Come on. Jace helped her to her feet as his team began their withdrawal. Ships waiting at docking bay 7. Think you can make it? Neera nodded, tears streaming down her face as she stumbled alongside him. Around them, other slaves were being freed, their own collars disabled by more of the rebels. The humans moved with practiced efficiency, covering each other as they escorted their charges toward safety. As they reached the docking bay, Neera caught sight of Vulcan's massive form pursuing them, his scales black with rage. You cannot escape me, human filth. The slave is mine. Jace turned, his weapon steady despite the chaos around them. Not anymore, he said simply, and pulled the trigger. The last thing Neera saw before the ship's doors closed was her former master falling, his roars of fury cut short. Then they were away, racing through space toward an uncertain but hopeful future. As the adrenaline faded, Neera found herself studying the human who had saved her. Jace Mitchell was younger than she'd first thought, probably in his early 30s, with brown hair and those remarkable eyes that seemed to see her as a person rather than an object. His hands were gentle as he helped her to a seat in the ship's small medical bay. You're safe now, he said, and something in his voice made her believe it. I promise. For the first time in 15 years, Neera smiled, a real smile, not the practiced expression of submission she'd worn like a mask. Thank you, she whispered. And deep in her heart, the flame of hope blazed brighter than it had in years. The Phoenix Dawn hummed quietly through hyperspace, its sleek hull cutting through the void between star systems. Jace Mitchell stood at the ship's observation deck, watching the streaked lights of distant suns blur past the viewport. 3 days had passed since the rescue at Kepler 7, and he found himself stealing glances at the woman who had changed everything with a single grateful smile. Neera sat curled in the corner of the ship's small common area, her violet eyes tracking every movement around her with the wariness of a creature that had known only captivity. She wore borrowed clothes from their emergency supplies, simple gray fabric that somehow made her silver-blue skin seem to glow. Her white hair, now clean and flowing freely past her shoulders, caught the ship's ambient lighting like starlight. She hasn't eaten much, observed Mika Santos, the Phoenix Dawn's engineer, as she joined Jace at the viewport. The compact woman with dark hair and knowing eyes had been his closest friend for 3 years, ever since they'd both lost everything to the same slaver raid. Can't blame her, though. 15 years of hell doesn't fade in 3 days. Jace's jaw tightened. I keep thinking about what that monster said, that she belonged to him. Like she was cargo instead of a living being with thoughts and feelings. His hands clenched into fists. How do we even begin to help her heal from that? Same way someone helped us, Mika said softly, placing a hand on his shoulder. With patience, kindness, and time. Lots of time. The ship's intercom crackled to life, and Captain Reeves' gruff voice filled the corridor. Mitchell, Santos, report to the bridge. We've got word from the network. Jace cast one more glance at Neera before heading toward the ship's nerve center. She was staring out a small porthole, her reflection ghost-like in the reinforced transparisteel. Something about her expression, a mixture of wonder and profound sadness, made his chest tighten with an emotion he wasn't ready to name. Captain Thomas Reeves was a bear of a man, his graying beard and weathered face telling the story of a lifetime spent fighting impossible odds. He'd found Jace floating in an escape pod 5 years ago, the sole survivor of a passenger liner destroyed by raiders. The old spacer had given him purpose, direction, and something resembling a family among the rebels who called themselves the Liberation Front. "Good work at Kepler 7, Reeves said without preamble, his fingers dancing across the holographic display that showed their current position. "Intel says you freed 37 slaves, including several who've already provided valuable information about slaver operations in the Vega sector." "What about the Valani woman?" Mika asked. "Any word on her background?" Reeves' expression darkened. "Nira Kethra. Her family were artists and musicians on the Valani homeworld before it was raided 15 years ago. She was one of only a handful who survived, the rest were either killed or scattered across the galaxy as slaves. As far as we can determine, she has no living relatives." The weight of that revelation settled over Jace like a physical blow. No family. No home to return to. Nothing but the scars of her captivity and the uncertain promise of freedom among strangers. "There's more," Reeves continued. "Vulcan survived your little party. He's put out a bounty on the girl, 50,000 credits for her return, alive and unmarked. That's serious money, enough to attract every low-life bounty hunter in 3 sectors. We can protect her," Jace said immediately. "She stays with us." Reeves studied him with knowing eyes. "Son, I've seen that look before. Usually ends with someone making foolish decisions in the name of honor or love." He held up a hand before Jace could protest. "I'm not saying it's wrong. Hell, maybe it's exactly what that poor girl needs. But you'd better be sure you're thinking with your head and not just your heart." Before Jace could respond, an alarm chimed softly. The ship's sensors had detected another vessel approaching from their starboard side, a sleek courier ship with neutral markings. "This is Captain Voss of the merchant vessel Wandering Star," came a smooth voice over the communications array. "We're responding to a general distress call. Do you require assistance?" Reeves frowned. There had been no distress call, and the ship's approach vector was too precise to be coincidental. "Battle stations," he ordered quietly. "Jace, get to." A tremendous impact rocked the Phoenix Dawn as the merchant vessel revealed its true nature. Energy cannons blazed from hidden weapon ports, and the ship's hull screamed under the assault. "It's a trap!" Mika shouted over the alarms. "They're jamming our hyperdrive." Jace was already moving, racing through corridors that tilted and shook with each hit. He found Nira exactly where he'd left her, pressed against the bulkhead with terror written across her features. The sight of her fear sent a surge of protective fury through his veins. "It's going to be okay," he said, pulling her to her feet. "Just another day in the life of a rebel, right?" To his amazement, she almost smiled. "Is this normal for humans? Constant danger and impossible odds?" "Only the good ones," Jace replied, leading her toward the ship's emergency stations. "The boring ones sit in offices and file reports." They reached the armory just as another volley struck the ship. Jace quickly pulled on body armor and checked his weapons, but his attention kept drifting to Nira. She watched his preparations with fascination rather than fear, as if she were seeing something entirely new. "You're not afraid," she observed quietly. "Terrified," Jace admitted. "But not of dying in a fight. I'm afraid of failing the people who count on me." He met her eyes. "I'm afraid of failing you." The simple honesty of his words seemed to stun her. For a moment, the ship's crisis faded into background noise as they looked at each other across the small armory. Nira's hand rose tentatively, her fingertips barely brushing the tactical vest he wore. "No one has ever." She began, then stopped, shaking her head. "In 15 years, no one ever cared whether they failed me." "Well, I do," Jace said simply. "I care what happens to you, Nira. Not because I think I owe you something, or because you're some kind of mission to complete. I care because you're you, because when you smile, it's like watching a star being born. Her breath caught, and for a heartbeat he thought she might say something in return. Then the ship shuddered again, and reality crashed back around them. Jace. Mika's voice crackled over the intercom. We need you on the gun deck. Now. He started toward the door, then stopped. Without thinking, he turned back and cupped Neera's face gently in his hands. Her skin was soft and warm, and he could feel her pulse racing beneath his palms. When this is over, he said, we're going to talk. Really talk. I want to know everything about you, not just your pain, but your dreams, your hopes, what makes you laugh. Can you promise me that? Neera's eyes filled with tears, but they weren't tears of sorrow. I promise, she whispered. Jace pressed a quick kiss to her forehead, a gesture that was somehow both innocent and profound, then ran toward the battle that awaited him. Behind him, Neera touched the spot where his lips had been, her heart racing with emotions she'd thought long dead. The Phoenix Dawn's guns roared to life as Jace reached his station, pouring fire into their attackers' shields. The enemy ship was fast and well armed, but it was also alone against a crew that fought not just for survival, but for each other. As the battle raged, Jace found himself thinking not of victory or defeat, but of violet eyes and silver skin, of a woman learning to trust again after 15 years of betrayal. Whatever the cost, he would see her safe. Whatever the future held, he wanted to face it at her side. The enemy ship's shields finally collapsed under the Phoenix Dawn's relentless assault. Captain Voss's smooth voice turned panicked as his vessel began to list, emergency systems failing across his ship. This isn't over, he snarled over the calm, Vulcan's bounty will bring others. You can't protect her forever. Watch me, Jace muttered, his finger hovering over the firing control. But it was Neera's voice that stopped him, soft and clear over the ship's intercom. She'd found her way to the bridge, her presence somehow calming the chaos around them. Let them go, she said simply. They're just hunters following a scent. The real enemy is the one who set the price on my head. Reeves looked at her with new respect, then nodded to Jace. Stand down. Let them limp home and spread the word, the Phoenix Dawn protects its own. As the damaged ship fled into hyperspace, Jace made his way back to the bridge. He found Neera standing beside the captain's chair, no longer the terrified slave from 3 days ago but a woman beginning to discover her own strength. Thank you, she said when she saw him. For keeping your promise. Which promise was that? She smiled, the second real smile he'd seen from her, and it was even more beautiful than the first. That I was safe. I felt it, even during the battle. For the first time in 15 years, I knew someone would fight for me. As the Phoenix Dawn jumped back into hyperspace, carrying them toward whatever destination awaited, Jace realized that somewhere between rescue and refuge, his mission had become something far more personal. He was falling in love with a woman who was learning to live again, and the thought both terrified and exhilarated him. In the depths of space, hearts could find each other across any distance. And sometimes, just sometimes, love could heal even the deepest wounds. 2 months had transformed everything aboard the Phoenix Dawn. Neera Kethra moved through the ship's corridors with purpose now, her silver-blue skin no longer bearing the pallor of captivity. She'd traded her borrowed clothes for a practical jumpsuit that Mika had modified to accommodate her taller, more graceful frame. Her white hair was braided in a complex pattern she'd remembered from her childhood, a small reclamation of her heritage that made Jace's heart skip every time he saw it. Power couplings running hot again, Neera called from beneath the engine console, her melodious voice carrying a confidence that still amazed him. She'd taken to ship maintenance with surprising aptitude, her artistic background translating into an intuitive understanding of the Phoenix Dawn's mechanical rhythms. Try rerouting through the secondary manifold, Mika suggested from across the engine room. The engineer had become Neera's closest friend among the crew, their bond forged through late-night conversations about loss, survival, and the possibility of new beginnings. Jace watched from the doorway, officially checking on repairs but really just stealing moments to observe the woman who had become the center of his universe. Nira had bloomed in freedom like a flower reaching toward sunlight. Her laugh came easier now, her smiles genuine rather than forced. She'd begun sharing stories of her homeworld, tales of crystal cities and music that could make the aurora dance. There, Nira emerged from the console, a smudge of lubricant across her cheek and satisfaction in her violet eyes. The coupling should hold for at least another week. Nice work, Jace said, unable to keep the admiration from his voice. You're becoming quite the engineer. Their eyes met across the engine room, and that familiar spark of connection passed between them, the same electric awareness that had been building for weeks. Nira's cheeks flushed a deeper shade of blue, and Jace felt his own pulse quicken. Well, Mika said loudly, breaking the moment with obvious amusement, I think I'll go check on the navigation systems. Very thoroughly. For several hours. She departed with a knowing grin, leaving them alone in the gentle hum of the ship's mechanical heart. Nira stepped closer, her movements graceful despite the grease staining her hands. Jace, she began, then hesitated. There's something I've been wanting to tell you. Before she could continue, Captain Reeves' voice crackled over the intercom. All hands to the bridge. We've got incoming priority transmission from the network. The moment shattered like crystal, but Jace caught the disappointment in Nira's expression before she turned away. Whatever she'd been about to say would have to wait, again. On the bridge, the holographic display showed a star map of the Altair system, with pulsing red indicators marking several locations. The face of Rebecca Torres, one of their network contacts, flickered in the communication array. Her usually composed features were tight with urgency. Captain Reeves, we've got a situation. Intelligence indicates a massive slave auction happening on Zirian Prime in 72 hours. High-value merchandise from across 3 sectors, including children from the Centauri colonies. Jace felt Nira tense beside him. Children. The word carried special weight for someone who'd been torn from her family as a young woman. What's the tactical situation? Reeves asked. Bad, Torres replied grimly. The facility is a converted fortress with heavy defenses. But here's the catch, our source inside says they're planning to move the captives immediately after the auction. Miss this window, and they disappear into the outer rim forever. How many ships would we need? Jace found himself asking. For a full assault. At least 6 heavy cruisers and fighter support we don't have. But there might be another way. Torres' expression grew thoughtful. The auction is exclusive, invitation only. If we could get someone inside. No, Jace said immediately, understanding where this was heading. Absolutely not. Nira's hand touched his arm gently but firmly. What are you talking about? Reeves answered when Jace remained silent. A rescue mission would require someone to pose as a buyer. Someone who could blend in with the slavers and their clients. His weathered face was grim. Someone who looks like high-value merchandise themselves. The implications hit Nira like a physical blow, but she didn't flinch. Instead, her spine straightened with the same quiet strength Jace had seen her develop over their months together. I'll do it, she said simply. Like hell you will, Jace snapped, his protective instincts flaring. You're not going anywhere near those monsters. We'll find another way. There is no other way, Nira replied, her voice steady despite the fear Jace could see in her eyes. You said it yourself, sometimes we have to fight for people who can't fight for themselves. Those children need help. Not at the cost of losing you. The words burst from Jace before he could stop them, laying bare the feelings he'd been struggling to contain. The bridge fell silent except for the soft hum of ship systems. Nira stared at him, her violet eyes wide with surprise and something deeper, something that made his heart race despite the circumstances. Jace, she whispered, Think about it, Reeves interrupted gently. We have time to plan this properly. Torres, send us everything you have on the facility layout and security protocols. We'll contact you in 12 hours with our decision. The transmission ended, leaving them in uncomfortable silence. Neera excused herself quietly, and Jace watched her go with a mixture of admiration and terror. He knew that look in her eyes, the same determination that had carried her through 15 years of captivity. She'd made her choice, and nothing he said would change her mind. He found her hours later in the ship's small observatory, staring out at the star field beyond. The artificial gravity was lighter here, and her hair floated around her shoulders like a silver halo. She'd changed into a simple dress, one of the few personal items she'd acquired during their supply stops, and the sight of her took his breath away. "Beautiful, isn't it?" she said without turning around. "I used to dream about this view during the worst times. Free space, no barriers, infinite possibilities." "Neera," Jace began, but she held up a hand to stop him. "Let me say this first," she requested, finally turning to face him. "For 15 years, I survived by making myself small, invisible, forgettable. I told myself that if I could just endure long enough, someday I'd be free. But I never really believed it would happen." She stepped closer, close enough that he could see the starlight reflected in her eyes. "Then you came," she continued, her voice soft but clear. "Not just to rescue my body, but to show me that my soul was worth saving too. You looked at me and saw a person, not property. You gave me back my name, my dignity, my hope." "You did that yourself," Jace protested. "I just opened the door." Neera smiled, and it was radiant. "Maybe. But you stayed to watch me walk through it. You've been patient while I learned to trust again, kind while I remembered how to live instead of just survive. You've never asked for anything in return." She reached up and cupped his face in her hands, her touch gentle but sure. "I love you, Jace Mitchell. I love your courage, your compassion, the way you fight for people you've never met because it's right. I love how you see the best in everyone, even when they can't see it themselves." The words hit him like a solar flare, burning away every careful defense he'd built around his heart. "Neera, I know you love me too," she said simply. "I can see it in how you look at me, hear it in your voice when you say my name. The question is, do you trust me enough to let me choose my own risks?" Jace closed his eyes, his hands covering hers. She was right, of course. Love wasn't about caging someone to keep them safe, it was about having faith in their strength, their judgment, their right to make their own decisions. "Those children," he said finally. "You see yourself in them." "Every single day for 15 years, Neera confirmed. "I can't save my past self, but maybe I can save them." When Jace opened his eyes, he found her watching him with infinite patience. This remarkable woman who'd survived horrors he could barely imagine, who'd emerged from captivity not broken but stronger, more compassionate than ever. How could he do anything but trust her? "If we do this," he said slowly, "we do it right. Full planning, backup plans for the backup plans, and you wear a transmitter so we can track your every heartbeat." Neera's smile could have powered a small star. "Yes. And when it's over," Jace continued, his voice growing rough with emotion, "when those children are safe and we're back in open space, I want to hear you say those words again." "Which words?" she asked teasingly, though her own voice was breathless. Instead of answering, Jace leaned down and kissed her. It was gentle at first, tentative, as if he was afraid she might disappear. But Neera's arms wound around his neck, pulling him closer, and the kiss deepened into something profound and desperate and perfect. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard. The stars wheeled silently beyond the viewport, witness to a love that had bloomed across the void between worlds. "I love you too," Jace whispered against her forehead. "More than I thought possible. More than I knew my heart could hold." "Then trust me," Neera said, her fingers tracing the line of his jaw. "Trust us. We've come this far together, we can face whatever comes next." As they held each other in the starlight, both knew that the mission ahead would test everything they'd built together. But they also knew something else, that love born from shared trials was stronger than any chain, more precious than any treasure, and worth any risk. The phoenix dawn carried them onward through the night, toward danger and hope in equal measure. And in the ship's heart, two souls who had found each other across the vast darkness of space prepared to fight for others' freedom, knowing that their love would light the way home. The end. Hearts Across the Stars, a tale of love, freedom, and the courage to fight for what matters most, set among the infinite possibilities of the cosmic void where two hearts found each other against all odds.